This is getting ridiculous. That's better.
So up until this point, everything that I've done in my shop for woodworking has been either purchase plans from other woodworkers, or I'll find a picture and, basically try to replicate it. But with this one, I really wanted to start from scratch and make my own design. There's nothing wrong with building off plans, and I'll probably do it again in the future. But I guess this was just kind of a personal challenge. I was going for a modern look, and actually I was inspired by the front ends of muscle cars. I like how the front grille has an angle inward. It just kind of gives the car a stance, kind of like it's ready to go. After I draw the template on the plywood, I cut it out with my jigsaw, and then I sand it smooth. You really got to be careful here because any imperfections are going to show up on your final piece. So here I'm tracing the lines to make a secondary template. This template is going to be a little bit bigger than the original template, and we're going to end up cutting it into 4 pieces. We'll use those 4 pieces to help us pick out our rough cut lumber. Also, we'll use them to route our mating surfaces. So here I'm just marking out those mating surfaces that I just referenced. These lines need to be cut perfectly straight because that is going to be where the pieces meet. So you'll see the gap if they're not cut right. Alrighty then, we've got all those pieces cut out. Now I can take those template pieces, lay them on my lumber, and figure out where I want to cut out these pieces. I'm considering the grain, I'm trying to avoid knots. I'm just trying to make sure that I got the nicest pieces that I can out of that particular board. And then I can take it over to my miter saw and cut them down to more manageable sizes for my jointer. Running the board over the jointer a couple times gives it a perfectly flat face. I don't need to worry about getting the edges because we're going to cut these later on the router anyway. Then we can take it over to the planer and get them all to the same thickness. That's my brother Joe. I like bouncing ideas off him, so when I texted him the idea that I had for this project, we thought it would be fun if we could make a video out of it together. So here we are. After tracing the template on the walnut pieces, I can take them over to the bandsaw and cut them all out. Next, we can attach our template to our walnut pieces with excessive amounts of double-sided tape. Now I can raise my router lift out of my assembly table so that the bearing rides along our template. So what this is doing is it's a pattern bit, and it will just follow along the contour of whatever that bearing rolls on. So what I'm cutting here is I'm only cutting on the mating surfaces. So in other words, only the parts that are going to be joined together with dowels. I'm leaving everything else larger than the template for a reason. And that reason is because we want to make sure that we have enough wood left over to route our final template with. So here I'm putting the final template on to make sure that we definitely have enough wood around the perimeter. Since everything looks good, I can go ahead and temporarily tape those joints together with some blue tape. I'm pulling tight as I put the tape down because I want to make sure that the joint is seamless. And these lines represent where I'm going to drill. Each joint will end up getting 2 dowels. Alright, so now comes the fun part. We can finally start to see the shape of this thing come together. Here we're just popping in the dowels. Kind of doing a dry fit, just making sure everything's gonna work out great and we don't have to worry about any surprises during glue up. The dry fit went well and all the joints seem to be coming together nice and tight. So here we needed to figure out a solution to clamp this thing. We've got angles in the front and the back, so what I'm doing here is I'm gluing on temporary pine boards, some scrap wood, And what that's going to be is parallel faces so that I can actually clamp with my parallel clamps. You know, without these, you really can't clamp to an angle. It would just slip down. Alright, so now it's time to glue this puppy together. We're using Type-On 3 here instead of Type-On 2, or 1 for that matter, just because it's darker and it will hide the imperfections at the joint a little bit better than the other stuff. After letting those dry overnight, we came back fresh the next day, removed the clamps, and then we can cut off our temporary boards that we use to clamp with. Then we can put our final template back on our piece. And it looks like we've got quite a bit of material left to remove, and I don't want to use the router for all of it. So Joey will take the bulk of that material away with my jigsaw. Look at him being so careful not to cross that line. After running to the store and getting another case of this double-sided tape, we could go ahead and set up the router to cut up our final shape. I'm using a new bit here that I got from Infinity Tools. It's called their Mega Flush Trim Router Bit. These are kind of cool because they have 4 individually brazed carbide tips in a compression design to eliminate chipping and tear out at the top and bottom of the material. That sounded like a commercial. Hashtag not sponsored. After cleaning up a few of the burn marks from the inside corners, it was time to start working on the drawer. So what I'm doing here is I'm moving my miter saw to match the angle of the side profile. I'm doing this because I want the drawer to be the same angle as the front. Next, I'll cut out the box joints for the drawer. I'm using my table saw with a dado blade and a simple jig that I made. I really like box joints, and this is going to look nice on this piece because one of the design features of this is that the drawer is exposed. So as you open the drawer, you'll be able to see the nice box joints. Fits like a glove. Now that we know that the box joints fit together nicely, we can go ahead and put some blue tape around the edges of the joints so that we don't get squeezed out. And then we can go ahead and glue it up, throw it in some clamps, and let it dry overnight again. After sanding with my random orbital up to 220 grit, we can go ahead and use the router taper once again to cut a rabbet to accept the drawer bottom. The drawer bottom is just a little piece of 1/4-inch plywood. Round the corners off with my spindle sander, a little glue and a few staples, and it's plenty strong. Next, we're going to work on the 2 horizontal support pieces. So here I'm just measuring the drawer plus both drawer slides. You take that dimension, cut my little piece of walnut out, center it up, and I'm using these little plugs with the pointy end on them. I line up the board where I want it to be and give it a little tap with my mallet. This locates my position for the dowels. Then I can take it over to my drill press. I put blue tape on my drill bit to give me a reference of how deep to drill. Then after that, we could just take it over to the router table and give it a nice little chamfer around all the edges except for the top edge. And then we were finally ready for our, well, I guess it'd be the final glue up. Now I can drill down a shallow hole that will accept the figure 8 tabletop fastener hardware. This hardware just allows the top to expand and contract when the humidity changes in the atmosphere. After gluing up a simple tabletop, I can use my homemade track saw to get one edge perfectly straight. Then I use my table saw to get the other edge perfectly straight. I wanted the underside of the tabletop to kind of flow down with the same angle as the side assembly pieces. So here I'm giving it a little under bevel cut on my table saw. I install the tabletop and then it's time to finish. I decided to use Osmo Pollux satin sheen to finish this piece. It's really nice stuff. I've used it a couple times before. I like it because it's really simple. You just wipe it on with a non-abrasive pad and you just keep moving along. Once you go a little ways, take a clean pad and just wipe off the excess and you're good to go. It only takes 2 coats and ends up being a real nice finish. All that's left to do is to install the door pull that I made. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. I'll let my fingers do the talking.
All right, so here she is, all finished. I'm really happy with the side profile and the drawer. Everything that was up here in the way is now in the drawer. I have this little tray that I can slide back and forth, get easy access to the back, and have my remotes up on top. And one thing I learned making this project is for future projects, I am definitely going to use pre-cut templates. Making this design on the side actually took quite a while. I had a little sketch like you guys saw, and I scaled it the best I could onto the template, but really it was kind of a shot in the dark as far as proportions go. So in the future projects, I want to use a CAD software and then design the piece before I even start cutting wood. That way I can see how it's going to look proportionate to other things in the piece. So for this one, my brother actually cut out some with his laser. They're in 4 pieces, just like the rough cut templates for this piece. But they can also be your final template. They have these indexing lines, so when these lines meet up like that, you know that this edge that the router is going to go on is perfectly flush. So you can actually tape these together, double side tape them onto your workpiece, and then use it as your final template as well. So stay tuned for future builds using templates, and thanks for watching this one.